All right, so we're recording this talk with Major General Andre Berry, the Adjutant General for the state of Nevada on June 15th, 2020. General Berry, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's a real treat. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force, so this is a real honor for me. So I introduced you as the Adjutant General of the state of Nevada. What does that mean?
So every state has an adjutant general, and under NRS 412, you basically have 5 responsibilities. The administration, the discipline, the mobilization, the organization, and the training of the troops. And the adjutant general is the commander of the Nevada National Guard, and you work directly for the commander-in-chief, which is the governor for the state of Nevada. And you're responsible for the day-to-day operation, training, readiness, overall administration of your organization. We have approximately over 4,000 airmen and soldiers and approximately 200 civilians. And when it comes to the protecting the homeland or fighting or winning our nation's wars or state partnerships, that's what we do. And every state has one. I'm the 30th Adjutant General for the state of Nevada, and also Governor Sisolak is the 30th governor for the state of Nevada. So it's kind of unique from that standpoint. But I get the opportunity and the privilege every day to lead the men and women of the Nevada National Guard.
General Berry, we're going to talk today about the Nevada National Guard response to both the COVID-19 crisis as well as the situation around the death of Mr. George Floyd. So most of us have become used to the National Guard units from across the country mobilized to fight the war on terror. We're much less familiar with the role of the National Guard in response to domestic crisis. What are the most important things citizens need to know when they hear that the National Guard has been mobilized to respond to a situation in their city or state?
And I think it's important to again reiterate the National Guard has 3 roles. And first, we fight and win our nation's wars. That's just critical. When they see that we deploy to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, et cetera, they're fighting and winning the nation's wars. The second thing that's important for everybody to understand is that we protect the homeland. That's the state of Nevada. It could be hurricanes, it could be floods, it could be civil unrest, it could be COVID-19, it could be a pandemic that's going on right now. And the third role that we have is we have these strong state partnerships. We have a partnership with Tonga and Fiji and in South Pacific, and we have personnel that go there on a regular basis. So when it comes to COVID-19, this pandemic that we're currently facing in our state and nation today and the world, we were put on what's called state active duty. The governor, as the commander-in-chief, has the ability to activate the National Guard to be on state active duty. And initially, we had approximately 120 of our personnel that were activated the first week in April because from January, which I believe we had our first case in the state, you started to see a big increase in the cases going up, in hospitalizations. And so the governor said, I'm going to need some more help when it relates to this pandemic. And we started to partner with what's called the Department of Emergency Management and Health and Human Services in the state. And then under the Stafford Act, he wrote a letter to the president to declare a major emergency in our state. And that's where he had the ability to get what's called 502F, or federal funds, through FEMA and through the Department of Homeland Security. And as a result of that, we brought on over 1,000 personnel. They're working on testing, they're working on transportation, they're working on logistics, they're working on serving meals, they're cleaning nursing homes. And so the Guard has the ability to do so many unique missions. And what most people don't understand about the National Guard that separates us from the active duty is you have people who, 3/4 of my force is what's called M-Day or drill status guardsmen, which means they're part-time. So they have all these other professions. What makes the Guard very unique and very well suited to work this Homeland Security mission is the fact that we have the ability, we're neighbors helping neighbors. We live in the neighborhood. We have these unique skills. We have doctors and nurses and lawyers. We have people who do transportation and logistics. We have law enforcement. We have all these unique individuals. And once we get activated, they're able to bring those unique skills, and they know their communities. when it comes to the civil unrest that you've seen, or even the protesting, we have people who are talking to some of the protesters. They know them, they're their neighbors, they're their friends, their kids go to school together. So we can bring a different type of calming effect that sometimes Title X or active duty forces cannot do. And that's the uniqueness of who we are. Our job is safety. We want to make sure we have a safe community to preserve the peace. But something that's critical for people to understand, this country has been protesting, I said this recently, since the Boston Massacre, since Paul Revere. Protesting and First Amendment rights are just who we are. And we want to preserve our Constitution and the rights of citizens to go out and exercise what we say peaceful protests. But also we recognize the fact that if it gets to the point of a civil unrest, we're not first responders in the military. We are not. That is local law enforcement. We are there to assist and support. And I think it's also very important to understand that we value the diversity of our communities. We value the diversity of the people who are out there. We understand the rights that they have. And we encourage people, in a time that we're living in now, this is the time for voices to be heard, and that's okay. But we also recognize the fact that we also want it to be done in a productive way, in a peaceful way, in a way that people can be present and their voices heard. But I always like to say this, the Guard is always there and always ready to ensure that we maintain the quality of life that this community so rightly deserves.
So, General Barry, in addition to being a leader in the National Guard, as a citizen of Reno, you are a longtime leader in the Reno Police Department, 25 years, which gives you a unique perspective. So, as a citizen and a leader, what are your thoughts on the public demonstrations we've seen in response to the death of Mr. George Floyd?
As a citizen, and I'll start off as a police officer. I was with the Reno Police Department for 25 years. And sometimes people believe that when they see something going on, it's the worst, it's never happened before. And I like to remind people of this fact here. We had, I was involved in two, what I'll say, civil unrest situations while as a police officer. One was during Hot August Nights, and one was during the Rodney King trial in Los Angeles, I believe in 1992. Going back to the Rodney King trial back in 1992, there was a lot of unrest going on around the nation, and there was a big upheaval about the fact is, how do you look at law enforcement? What was important? What was going on? And what could we do? And I remember going into the chief of police at that time, Richard Kirkland, and I said to him, you can't pay attention to what's going on with the rest of the world. You have to think about this community. And he said, what should we do? And I said, we should have a protest march. We should lead and put together and set up a protest march. And he, and I think after he got off the floor, and when I brought this up, I said, here's why it's important. People want to have a voice, and they want to speak, and they want to make sure that their voice is heard. So we organized a protest march starting at the Arch and right down Virginia Street. And it was a huge turnout. And it was a peaceful protest march. And he was in the front, arm in arm with the citizens. And they were singing songs. They were singing current songs. They were singing We Shall Overcome. They were singing, somebody had a birthday. Somebody sang Happy Birthday. And then at the end of the march, there was a series of speeches that were given by the protesters. And then the chief gave a speech. And it was so successful, it was on the front page of the New York Times. But that set a pattern for us really understanding the importance of community engagement as law enforcement, community partnership as law enforcement, community collaboration as law enforcement. I believe our motto back then was your police, our community. And I believe they still have that today. And so that's the key. And even when we had the civil unrest during Hot August Nights, we came back and looked at, could we engage better? Could we do better? Could we have better tactics that we could work with? And as a result, it caused us to improve some things. Keep this in mind. This is the most critical thing. We need the police. We need the police to have strong partnerships. We need the police to work strong with the community. But also we need the police to be very fair and very engaging and understanding, and to understand that we live in a diverse society. And the law enforcement needs to represent in their forces what's right about society and in their demographics. And so I remember we did like sometimes I think in 7 years in a row, we did diversity and inclusion training. We had a diversity officer. So to stay progressive, you must have a law enforcement organization that represents the community, understands the community, and works with the community. And as a citizen today that living in this great state of Nevada, I think it's important that we can set a standard and we can elevate and we can talk about and we can execute on what makes us great as a state and make sure that we create these opportunities to work together, to dialogue, to engage, and let the world know that law enforcement and the community can coexist as they should. And it's got to be like almost a non-negotiable in terms of the police and law enforcement and sheriff departments and community organizations working together. But you must have progressive leadership. You must have progressive leadership in the community. You must have openness to recognizing in law enforcement, remember this fact right here. You're going to have situations where there are going to be critical incidents. That's the nature of the job. But all the deposits that you put into the community before that happens is going to give you the return on investment for when things do happen. And also keep this in mind. Human beings work in law enforcement. And will they make mistakes? Probably. But do you own up to it? Do you learn from it? And do you re-engage from it and get better from it? That's the fact. So the biggest thing is continue to communicate. Second thing is make sure that we as a community know that law enforcement and community can and will and must coexist. And the third thing is our hearts and minds have to be in the right place as a community and as a law enforcement organization. And I'll be the first to say, I've told everybody this, I've been in all 54 states, territories, District of Columbia. I still say, without a doubt, this is the best state and the best community to live in the country. I still believe that.
General Barry, sir, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.